Traditionally, canon law kind of has a generally twofold application. One perspective is outward facing. How should the church relate in her own canon law to international law, to natural law, to the moral norms of human society? So we want to make sure that we're obeying what pertains to the natural law, like the rights of human conscience and human freedom, or the dignity of human persons in the Catholic Church and in our own internal life in a way that is concordant with international and moral law in the wider society. But we also want to think about how our own canonical laws invite us to think about external natural laws and moral laws. And we want to create good church-state relationships. Religious freedom is important, the freedom of the church to preach the gospel, to govern her own institutions, her own respect of others. In that context, her relationship with states. And then on the inside, it's like governing not just the natural law dimension of the respect of persons in the life of the church, the clergy, the religious, etc. But it's also thinking about the supernatural life of the church. You might say it's about divine rights. What has God instituted in the sacramental life, in the apostolic deposit of faith? What are our duties towards what God has done among us by supernatural initiative? How are we to conduct ourselves? It could be as simple as how are we rightly to enact Eucharistic adoration? Or it could be what are the requisite dispositions a person needs to be ordained a priest? And how are those norms to be observed by real institutions in their day-to-day life? So in that sense, canon law is pretty vast in its application, and it's actually a little bit undersubscribed. You need more canon lawyers thinking about that relationship externally to states and to civil society, and internally towards our own supernatural prerogatives and our own internal natural and just relationships. When you think about the formation of Leo XIV, who studied canon law and did a doctorate in the subject here at the Angelicum, one of the things he was focused on is religious life, and he was studying from 1983 to 1985. This is right after the 1983 Code is revised. He's writing a doctorate on the place of the superior or the prior according to the rule of St. Augustine in his own religious order, and he's looking at how you can interpret the constitutions of his order in the post-Vatican II period in light of the newly revised 1983 Code of Canon Law. So he's sort of thinking about what do we do in terms of the Code of Canon Law today in our own religious order. Now, looking back, after years, we can see God providentially prepared him to be the superior of the Augustinians and so forth. But, at the time, what he's trying to understand is how does religious obedience work? And it's important for the whole church because what you see there is that religious obedience is a consent of the will, but it's through a precept that is followed by the mind. So the intellect sees a certain teaching of what is to be done under the auspices of a superior, and then it consents with the freedom of the heart. This requires that we are in reference to the truth about the Catholic faith, the truth that is taught to us of Christ and of Christ himself as the truth, and that the life of the church, sacramental, evangelical, doctrinal, moral, and ethical, that this is a truth about how we ought to be before God that is grounded in reality, and when we obey it and observe it, it's liberating. It's freeing us to love what's truly good and to become free in ways that are that involve our flourishing, that are life-giving ways of becoming free. So then in that case, the superior is really trying to, through the medium of the rule and the law of the church, point you towards collective human flourishing. How are we praying together to become a certain kind of community and to become certain kinds of persons? Persons free in the Spirit of God to pray more deeply and more profoundly, to be incorporated into the Christ mystically at a more profound level. That's a really interesting kind of objectivity, an objectivity of law that is liberating to the whole human person. And there's themes like this in the Pope's writing as a young priest, writing in canon law inspired by St. Augustine. It's evident that that could be very important if you think about it at the level of the whole universal Catholic Church.